Hey guys, welcome to Ducks Dash on Dash Sports. I'm host Izzy LaRue. Right now, Michael Strite isn't with me, but he'll be here soon. But I just want to get into a little topic that Washington State and Utah have been talking about. One of the Dash hosts, Cody, we got into some Twitter fights, and he was telling me here. I'll read the tweet word for word right now. He said Washington State has more conference wins and players on all Pac-12 teams in the past 5 years than Oregon. High school recruits are great, but if they don't translate to team or individual success, then what's the point? Cody, I completely agree. But the thing is, past 5 years, let me go through your Washington State's bowl runs. 2015, you went to the Sun Bowl, you won. Good job for that. And then 2 years in a row, you went to the Holiday Bowl and lost. Then you went to the Alamo Bowl, won, Cheez-It Bowl, and lost. These are all bowls that no one cares about because if you're not playing the Cotton Bowl, Rose Bowl, in the conference championship game, no one really cares what bowls you play. You even ask the fans. The fans are going to be like, oh, yeah, we made it to the Cheez-It Bowl. The Cheez-It Bowl is basically like the Red Box Bowl. That's the bowl where you could care less. Like, I'd rather watch an episode of Friends, which is the worst show ever, than watch the Red Box Bowl. And then he was talking to me about, oh, we had the best recruiting school or whatnot. Recruiting is different than development. And Utah came in and said the exact same thing. They're like, we're better at developing players than Washington State is, which is true. You've seen it with their team last year. Even though they lost to Oregon in the championship game, they were a really good school. And Oregon, you ask any of the players there, they were scared to play them, not only because they respected them, but because of how good that quarterback and the line and all the weapons that they had, and even on the defense. And I just want to say, if you want to go by history, because you're talking about history right now, Washington State historically has not been good at all. Historically, the good schools have been USC, UCLA, some Berkeley teams with Marshawn Lynch and Aaron Rodgers. Even Oregon historically were not good. But my whole point about this is, Cody, why are you talking about the past 5 years? We're in the present right now. As you can read for the headline, Oregon's about to be the new powerhouse, not only in the Pac-12 for the next 5 years, but in the whole country. We were one win away from being in the top four schools, and I'm glad that we weren't the fourth ranked school in the country when the regular season ended, because we would have had to play Joe Burrow and that legendary LSU team. I'm glad we got to play Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl, and we got to show them that Jonathan Taylor wasn't all that, even though I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be the offensive rookie of the year, playing behind that stout Indiana Colts O-line. But come on, Cody, I don't want to hear history ever again, because this show is about what's happening right now. I could care less about what happened last year, even though we won the Rose Bowl last year. And the only reason I bring up last year is because last year's better than bringing up 2015 or 16 or 17 or even before that. Because if you talk about the year before is always a stepping stone if you have the right tools. Not like Washington when they lost Jacob Eason, and then they were talking about, oh, who's going to fill his shoes? I kind of laughed at that topic because it's Jacob Eason. Who cares who fills his shoes? You're talking about like he was Justin Herbert. Now, Justin Herbert, we discussed who's going to fill his shoes, which is going to be Jay Butterfield. He's going to be legendary. Just watch, Oregon fans, because Oregon actually has offensive weapons and a stout defense with Justin Flo, who's coming in, who's a five-star recruit, with Kayvon Thibodeau, who's also a five-star recruit. 2 years in a row, Oregon has got the number one recruits in California, and Kayvon Thibodeau was a second recruit in the whole entire country. Washington State, who are you guys getting that are 5 stars or 4 stars? Like, I get it if you want to say development. Development's nice. You can brag about that all you want, but if you're not getting the top recruits, because Oregon, we're not only getting players from across the country, we're getting players in Los Angeles, where Pac-12 schools are at, where USC is at, where UCLA is at. We're taking players from people's backyards. I don't see Washington State doing that at all, or even any other school, because if USC can't get their own recruits, what can Washington State say? Because USC, they're about to be they'll be decent this year, but I don't see Washington State really doing that much this year. You guys lost Mike Leach, who's a great coach. He got you guys to 11-2 record. You guys were first in the Pac-12 at one point. But I'm gonna read you guys some stats real quick about because I mentioned the bowl wins from the past 5 years from Washington State. But let me mention where the ranking wise where Washington State was at. 2015, you guys were fourth in the Pac-12. Next year, you guys were sixth. The year after that, you were fifth. And no, my bad. You guys were fourth, then first, and now you guys were like what, fifth last year? Yeah, you guys made it to the Cheez-It Bowl. I mean, that's nice that you guys were first in the Pac-12 in 2018, but that was 2 years ago. Fast forward to now, like 3 years later, you're in a conference now with teams that are catching up and getting better recruits. Development doesn't really help if you don't have the recruits because we all know you look at Alabama, you look at Clemson, you look at Ohio State, LSU schools in the SEC. They always have the best recruits because they're perennial powerhouses. And when you have perennial powerhouses, you get the best recruits, and you don't really need to develop 3 stars or lower. You have the top recruits where then it's easier to develop them, and you know they're going to be top NFL prospects. You look at that with our Oregon defense. You look at Javon Holland, potentially even Brady Breeze. He won't be a high draft pick, but he'll be somewhere like Troy Dye was. And then you look at Justin Flo coming in. And offensive side, you have receivers like Micah Pittman, whose brother was the first pick off in the second round. He went to the Colts. So you look at all the recruits our Oregon's getting. We're making moves to become a perennial powerhouse, a school that's not to be trifled with, not only in the Pac-12, but also in the other Power 5 conferences. So Cody, Ute Dash, Cougar Dash, I don't really want to hear this talk anymore about being a top recruiting school because of what happened in the past 5 years or whatever. I want to hear what's happening right now from you guys. Give me current events or future. If you guys have to go in the past to bring up some stats, I don't want to hear it, honestly, and I know the viewers, they don't want to hear it either because it's kind of boring talking about the past because everyone knows what happened in the past. You can Google it or whatever. All right, when we're talking about the present or the future, you actually have to use your head to understand what's going to happen and what might happen. So honestly, guys, I like it. I can't wait to do our crossover episodes because and Cody, one last thing before I move topics, because in the first part you said in your last sentence you said high school recruits are great, but if they don't translate to team or individual success, then what's the point? Then is a comparison word. You do, what do you like? Would you rather do you prefer an apple than an orange? You should use then, THEN, a sequence. All right, so now we have Michael back in. Michael, what do you think about my whole rant right there?
Even though that family is spread out all over the Pac-12, and that's really what I just wanted to add in. But you covered all the bases there, Izzy.
All right, well, so we're gonna go on to our next topic. I don't want to make this a whole roast show. So you were talking about Penei Sewell and his brother. So let's just talk about him. You mentioned it last episode, saying that he might be a Heisman candidate. So is he really a potential Heisman candidate, Michael?
Look, I understand that logistically, you could get some pretty good betting odds on Penei Sewell for the Heisman right now because an offensive lineman just doesn't win. I mean, it's a quarterback almost always, and then sometimes they like to throw in a running back or a wide receiver into that mix, but it's usually just, whatever quarterback in college football put up the best stats that year. But I started making this argument last year, and I do unquestionably believe there should be a Heisman campaign mounted for Penei Sewell. I mean, last year, he was, without a doubt, the most valuable offensive lineman in college football. And and he's not even a senior yet. I mean, he's not even close to that. He's going to be a top 5 NFL draft pick, a really strong candidate to be a number 1 NFL draft pick. I mean, the moment he stepped onto campus freshman year and I watched him, I said, I think we have a future top 5 pick, like, on this team.
I'm gonna stop you right there real quick, Michael. Did you say last year he was the best offensive lineman in the country?
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, he could have been
comparing to the other linemen in the draft class, Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, and all of them.
He's the most valuable. I mean,
really,
he literally. I mean, he was injured for a part of the year. And this was, I believe, even 2 years back, because this was when Oregon was in a real slump. And it really, he missed half of his freshman year. And it was really incredible the way that he stepped up and immediately became like the leader, not the leader in terms of like leadership, but the most, valuable player on the offensive line, full of seniors, and all these NFL prospects. He was the best. And then when he got injured, the offense went into a ridiculous slump, 2 years ago. And it was sort of bizarre because you're just looking around like, wait, our offense, Oregon's offense was supposed to be good. What happened here? And the reality was that Penei Sewell was out and everything was thrown off. And he was just that valuable that the entire offense really came to a screeching halt without him. And that was in his freshman year. He built upon that the following year. He's going to build upon it, continuously moving into this year. And that dude's just a freak of nature. I mean, people would come scout Oregon practices for the other offensive linemen, for the Justin Herberts, and they would all look down at their notes and say, who's that guy? Because they're saying, I want to draft that guy. And then they're like, oh, he's a sophomore. Can't take him until next year. Like, it was mind-blowing to these scouts because they would have taken Penei Sewell top 5, top 10 last year. Don't even think about, the potential number 1 pick upcoming this year. Obviously, if the season goes to plan for the Oregon O-line and everything.
Yeah, you guys read in the subtitle too that there's only been 10 linemen since 1982 that were in the top 10 of Heisman votes. So, Michael, you really think he can crack that top 10?
Oh, I expect him to crack the top 10, and I would be really disappointed if the University of Oregon doesn't have some sort of a campaign going, some sort of a even if we're looking at only teams that played in the spring, because you're seeing maybe a fraction of actually the college teams playing in spring. Maybe just among the spring teams, there can be a push for Penei Sewell to be the best player out of that category. And, it's going to be a weird year, but I think in a normal year, he would without a doubt be a top 10. And that's something that I can definitely get behind. Is he going to win? No, but I'm willing to be the conductor of this Heisman train for him.
So you're saying that Oregon should go make a campaign for him? I think they should make a campaign for Javon Holland, because I don't really see Oregon being able to push 2 of their players into the spotlight like that. And Javon Holland, safety is a lot sexier position than the lineman position. You know that, Michael.
Yeah, it comes down to 2 things. First of all, we do talk about this as a campaign because it genuinely is something that requires a lot of publicity, a lot of investment by an athletic department. The team needs to kind of create an aura and an energy around a player for a Heisman campaign to get going. And it really is something where you're trying to win voters over, and, teams are trying to push their player and say, oh, we want him to be in the top 10. We want him to be in the finalists, that stuff. So I think if Oregon wants somebody to win the Heisman, obviously Javon Holland is a better guess, or even make the finalists. I think Javon Holland's a better deal. And I agree with you that they can only really put their energy behind one. I think Penei Sewell is just going to have a better year. And I think if Javon Holland has an outstanding start to the year, you can convince me to move my allegiance and say, let's get behind him. But I think Penei Sewell is just going to be consistently dominant every week, day in and day out, and it's just going to be a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I would love to see him and Javon Holland to get in the top 10 votes. Maybe even Javon could get in like the top 5 or 3. That would be very ideal as an Oregon fan. But if we had Pine add him in there too in the top 10, that would be legendary because really 10 linemen. And we all know, like in the past, I don't know how many years there's been linemen in the Hall of Fame or even make Pro Bowl teams that are actually and they make their teams better. That would solidify his spot in the draft, I think, if he was in the top 10 of Heisman votes.
Yeah, I mean, for both of them, if they're a top 10 Heisman candidate, given their positions, I think without a doubt that makes them a top 10 NFL draft pick. It really is a season of high expectations for both of these players. Last year, they were just sort of trying to win their team games, not really looking towards the future. And now they come into this season with an eye on the future in the same way that Justin Herbert was last year. I mean, last year, Justin Herbert was trying to do something great with the University of Oregon, but every time he went out there, there was talk about the NFL scouts that were there, where he was going in mock drafts, and what this means for his NFL career. And that spotlight wasn't on Javon Holland and Penei Sewell, and now it's going to be. Now every time they step out there, we're going to see these tapes come out about these NFL scouts saying, "Oh, I like him for doing this," or like you see this mistake that he made, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be a lot more scrutiny. It's going to be a lot more of a pressure season for them to perform, and I'm really interested to see whether both of them can take their game to the next level because they both play at a really high level. They're both anchors on the offense and defense, respectively. So, what's the next level for them? Especially for Penei Sewell because I think he had such a fantastic season last year. It's just consistency for him because I think he's as good as it can get. So it's just kind of keeping that up.
I mean, for me, I want to see Pine. I want to see what he does with the other linemen because after all the 4 seniors departed and got on NFL rosters, I want to see what he does with people who he doesn't have a lot of game time experience with. I want to see how much of a leader he really is because in NFL drafts, they take everything into account, not only your play style, but your personality, what you eat, what you drink, what you like, and especially your leadership style. Are you a guy that likes to be in the spotlight, or are you kind of more timid like Justin Herbert? That was the big thing about him in the draft last year. They were talking about how he's not really vocal as you would want a quarterback to be. So I want to see what Pine does with these new starting 4 linemen alongside with him.
That is a really great point. Is he going into that NFL career? A lot of people are talking about Justin Herbert and not just what kind of a talent he is, but what kind of a leader he is, whether he can be the captain of a locker room, whether he can be a quarterback that teammates rally behind. And I am really excited to see Penei Sewell be the captain of this offensive line. I mean, he's gone from being the young one among a really experienced group of 4 seniors, plus a 5th senior that was their backup. And now he's going to be the old man there among the offensive line, the one with by far the most experience. And that's going to be really fascinating to watch, both for his performance and the way that he can sort of build up the rest of the offensive line, the way that they work with him, the way they work with the new quarterback. Everything has to do with it. One thing's for certain, that whoever Oregon's quarterback is next year, they're going to be pretty darn happy about Penei Sewell on the blind side. And
Most
that
definitely.
is a gift, unlike any other, to have him blocking. I remember, I don't remember too strongly, but I remember last year, there was literally times where CJ Verdell and Penei Sewell in the huddle would just say, "Okay, I'm going to run right behind you. Like, stop messing around. I'm going to run behind you, and we're going to get some yards." And it just worked because he was that good.
I mean, that's what you want as a running back, just linemen to be able to run behind, put your back on him, and then once you see a hole open, then you just shoot it down right there. So that's perfect for CJ. I love seeing him do that all year last season. I feel like that's enough Penei Sewell talk. Let's go into our next topic, another top prospect in their state, and someone who I mentioned in my rant before. What's the ceiling for Kayvon Thibodeau, Michael?
Kayvon Thibodeau, very exciting debut last year. He's somebody that I think of Oregon's roster last year had the most growth throughout the season because he came in as number 1. I mean, there couldn't be more hype around a guy like this because he was the number 1 prospect. I mean, everyone was showing his high school highlights. Everyone was just, all eyes were on him whenever he ran onto the field, plain and simple. And he was this freshman that wasn't going to be on the field all the time. He was sort of getting in the rhythm of things. He was a rotation guy. And he had some plays. He had some flashes, but it wasn't there consistently. He wasn't on the field a lot at the beginning of the year. And you fast forward to the end of the year in the Pac-12 championship, in the Rose Bowl, he's an absolute wrecking ball. I mean, it was just a treat for any Oregon fan to watch him run around on defense, to watch him make these plays, to watch him chase quarterbacks, and to watch just the next level that he hits. The potential for him this year is scary. A really, really high ceiling for a guy that is now just in his second year. And the ceiling is to fulfill that number one, because that is a really high ceiling to come in as number one and not disappoint, because you know how recruiting is. Justin Herbert was a 3-star prospect. All the time, there's these top 5 just aren't anything special in college, and that's sort of the end of their football careers, is they don't go on and do anything important after that. They peaked in high school, and that's not the case with Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, from what we saw last year, he's here to stay, and he is here to do some damage, and I think that's the ceiling for him. Izzy, you can expand upon that.
Yeah, no, definitely. His ceiling is wherever he wants to take it to. It could be potentially the first pick in the NFL draft when he comes out of college. But my whole thing is with that, being the number one recruit or being a top guy in college or whatever, that's cool and all. But if you don't put in the work or the dedication necessary to keep improving every year, it's not going to translate to your game. Now, we saw with Kayvon, he definitely put in the work. You saw it, like you mentioned in the beginning of the season. He wasn't getting that much playing time. And when he was in, he had some flashes. But you fast forward to the end of the season where he was in championship games, he showed up in Levi Stadium and in Anaheim where Oregon needed him most, because they were telling him, hey, we need you to get to the quarterback. You want to wear that Ducks uniform. You want to be in front of all these fans in Eugene, a historic stadium in the Pac-12. We want you to be that guy. And he became that guy at the end of the season. And so now he has a momentum going into this season, which kind of got stopped because of COVID-19. And who knows when they're going to play, because there's talks of either playing in the spring or playing in the winter. I even heard something about Thanksgiving play, but I know that's false. So if he keeps on putting in the work and doing what he's doing, because if you look at the guy, like, he's a big dude. Like, he does not, like, last year he did not look like a freshman at all. He looked like a grown man at the age of 18, 19. So I'm just excited to see what he does in this extended off season, because I know it's hard for football players because no one wants to play in the winter, because when you're playing in the winter, most states aren't like California. It snows in the winter. It gets really cold. It gets rainy. It's not football playing type of weather. That's why football is played in the fall. And that's why everyone talks about autumn being football season, because it's the perfect time of the year to play football weather-wise.
Yeah, and the Oregon fans embraced him last year for sure. And that's one of the things that also comes with that number one, is that in those first few weeks, I mean, it wasn't like hostile towards him, but there was definitely some people calling for him and just saying, well, you know, it's been disappointing, or I want to see him on the field more. What's going on with him? But obviously, every Oregon fan is excited about him being on the roster. And you talked about just his size and his physicality and all those physical attributes. Those were there week one. He showed up, just NFL prospect, boom, ready to go, ready to play on Sundays. And then the next step for him was to put in that work, to learn the schemes, to learn from all the other, you know, older players there, to learn from a really good coaching staff. And that's what happened. He put in the work, and he was able to just use those physical tools to the best of his ability. And the only concern for me is whether he's sort of looking ahead to the NFL, because when you are that talented, there is a concern about, especially when you just won something too. I mean, he's won his Rose Bowl, he's won his Pac-12 championship. It's always across the board in every sport going to be harder after you've won to find what it takes to be angry and to be hungry to come back and win again. So for Kayvon Thibodeau, There's a lot of factors that could say that maybe he just doesn't work as hard. Maybe he's just sort of coasting a little bit through the year, especially with the pandemic as well. Everything could come up in a situation where Kayvon not necessarily takes a year off, but just doesn't work as hard as he was expecting to. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's a concern for somebody that is that talented. But if he lays down the work and if he keeps improving, I mean, the ceiling is, like you said, up there with the best of them in the Pac-12 and in the country, and a human highlight reel.
Yeah, you talk about all this, like if he puts in the work or whatnot, if he's taking it off here. He reminds me a lot of Chase Young from the Ohio State. Okay, guys, I don't want you guys to get mad. I said the. There it is. I'll only say it once this show if I bring up Ohio State again. Because how tall he was, his size and everything. Now, he has a couple years to put on more muscle and look like Chase Young, but if he follows Chase Young, because as college players or even in the NFL, they follow the players years above them. They want to see what is he doing to get where he's at, because Chase Young was the second pick in the 2020 NFL draft. Arguably, he could have been the first because he's put in, but because of how legendary Joe Burrow's season was, he was undoubtedly the unanimous first pick of any team that needed a quarterback, which was the Bengals. And Kayvon, I really think that because of Oregon's goals for the next 5 years or even further down the road of being a perennial powerhouse, not only in the Pac-12, but like I said, in the country, he's going to have to put in that work, because once after your freshman season, you're a sophomore, and during that off season, you have new recruits coming in, new freshmen coming in, and they're not only looking up to the seniors or the juniors, but they're looking up especially to the sophomores, because the sophomores and freshmen, they're always, you see in every part of either high school, college, or even professionally, the freshmen always are hanging out with the sophomores more because they're closer in age and they have more time together, because the season before the sophomores were just freshmen. So he has to set an example for all those incoming freshmen. And I guarantee you that he's going to do that, because he seems like that person. In an article that Go Ducks made when he first when he announced that he was going to Oregon, and he enrolled early into the school year to get to finish classes earlier to be able to get his degree earlier to be in the NFL draft, he talked about, like, I'm here for football. This is a business decision. I came to Oregon because it's a good academic school. It's a good football school. I'm not here to party. I'm not really here to make friends like that. Like some people are here to do that. I'm here to prove myself and to get to the NFL. So that's exactly what he's going to do, Michael.
Oh, wow. Again, Izzy, you covered all the bases, and I agree with you that those freshmen, they have those veterans on the team, but they're also going to get real close to the other freshmen and the sophomores that have just been through what they've been through. And not to mention the other sophomores on the team that sophomores or redshirt freshmen that, they've been on the team for the same amount of time as Kayvon, but they sat out all of last year. For Kayvon, it becomes important to see whether he's sort of on his own, in his own world, working on his game by himself, or whether he takes an active role in being a teacher, in being a coach, and just building chemistry with everyone on that defense. Because there isn't a lot of pressure for him to be a leader this year, but he needs to start growing into that role, because if he, progresses and continues to dominate, he's going to be the captain of the defense very soon. And that doesn't just mean you're the best player on the field. That means you're the spiritual leader of that defense. You're the one whose job it is to get everyone's energy level and everyone's enthusiasm and everyone's teamwork up to a certain standard. And I think there's so much experience and so much wisdom on that defense. You're thinking those Javon Hollands, those defensive backs,
Yep.
They're going to impart that on Kayvon Thibodeau. They're going to do their best to pass that on, and it's up to Kayvon to see how well he receives it. But now we're getting into some really, vague stuff, because from a talent perspective, we know what he's capable of, and the ceiling is as high as it can be, Izzy.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's going to be exciting to see what he does with Justin Flo too, because they're two of the number one recruits in California the past 2 years. And I'm going to wrap it up right there. Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to follow us at Dash Sports TV on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. And check out our website, dashsports.tv. And make sure to catch our weekly shows Fridays at 5 p.m. And make sure to catch Bears Dash right after us next.